Hi friend, I want to thank you for joining me today. At Out of the Box Ministries, we believe that a vibrant spirituality is experienced by not just believing that God exists or that Jesus died on the cross so that we could one day go to heaven. God is a loving Father, and as every loving Father does, He wants to see His children experience success in every area of life. So we create content like this to help you grow spiritually and succeed in life, getting to know God better. Today, we're going to talk about the different levels of faith. And we're going to give them this understanding of how some people seem to really be into their faith, into their religion, while for others it's just a sideline. And this really stemmed from a conversation I had with a friend who's asked me, Will, why are you so into what you believe? And it made me stop and think and said, maybe I need to think and meditate and study and pray about why I am so into my faith, into my relationship with Jesus, and want so much to share it while other people aren't. As a young Christian, I used to be critical and kind of wonder and question the legitimacy of other people's faith, why they weren't as passionate or as zealous as I was. But through some study and some thinking real hard on it, I started to realize that we all experience our faith and our relationship with God at different levels and different times, and we're inspired and encouraged to grow in that. So today we're going to study that, and in our time together, we're going to go through and learn about the 6 different levels of faith, and you'll be able to identify where you are and what stage and what level you're at, but also where the next level for you might be and how you can get there, what the steps you can take to move forward and grow in your faith, grow in your spirituality. But also we're going to be able to help identify where other people around us are in their level of faith so that we can better witness to and serve and minister to the people around us. But before I get into it today, I want to give a shout out to Rick in Virginia. Rick in Virginia, God bless you. I hope you're continuing to grow in your faith, and I look forward to getting together with you real soon. In John 14:2, Jesus said, "In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would not have told you this. And I am going to prepare a place for you." Now, I believe that when Jesus said that, He was really talking about our eternal dwelling place in heaven, when we get to heaven to be with God. And while it's that dwelling place of a house or a room that we're going to stay in, I also believe it's symbolic of the intimate and personal relationship we're going to have with God when we get there. And I think sometimes as we think about and contemplate what heaven's going to be like, we miss out on that aspect of heaven. Sometimes we can view heaven like our church experience when we get to worship, and there's going to be crowds and thousands of people there. And maybe if I'm lucky, I'll get a seat in the balcony or in the back pew, and I'll get to be like at a mega church or at a concert where I'll see the outline of a person way down there on stage, and that's God, and I'll be able to experience Him in an electrifying way, in an energetic way, but I won't be close. Maybe if I'm lucky, there'll be a big screen and I'll be able to see His face, but I'll be so far removed because of the crowd. But I think what Jesus was trying to say is, in His Father's house are many rooms, many opportunities that we'll be able to engage in a relationship with Him. As Paul said, now we see in part, but then we shall see in full, face to face, and know Him even as He knows us. And so I think that's what really Jesus was talking about. Yet at the same time, today I want to take a little bit of license with that illustration of the house and use it to define our levels of faith as we grow in our spirituality. John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist movement, and whom the Wesleyan Church is named after as they try to emulate his doctrine and beliefs on how we relate to God, used the illustration of a house to kind of explain the different levels of grace and how we experience the grace of God in our lives. And so I'm going to use that illustration of a house and how we can experience God and different levels of intimacy with Him as we invite Him into the house, into the home of our lives. So today, of course, I'm going to start with that front porch. And as we do, I want you to think about, as we go through these rooms, the architecture of the house, I want you to think about, where are you at? Where are you in your level of relationship and your level of faith with God? So let's start with that front porch. And I call this the level of knowing. And there's an idea of knowing God. I think that's really where it starts. Jesus said in John 17:3, he says, "This is eternal life. This is life, to know God, to know you, Father, and the one you have sent, Jesus Christ." And Jesus said, this is where it all begins. And there's a lot of people who know of God or believe that God exists, but to really get to know somebody is like spending time and coming up onto the porch. I believe that sometimes Jesus really wants to come up onto the porch of our lives and sit and talk with us. Think about your relationships with people. You may know your neighbors, they may walk down the road and you wave and say hi, but you've never really gotten the chance to know them. It's in the same way that we may know that God exists. We've heard the story of the gospel, how Jesus came to this world and he lived and he died on the cross and one day he's coming back. But to really get to know him is to invite him onto the porch of our lives. In Job 42, Job said after he'd gone through everything he went through and all of his trials and difficulties, he said this, "I had heard of you, but now I have seen you." In other words, he's saying, I've gone through all this, and what came out of all of Job's trials, he said, I knew of God at some point. I knew about God, but now through all of this, through the difficulties, now I know God. And I think that's a level of faith of going from just saying, okay, I believe that God exists to I know who he is. And so getting to know God is inviting him onto the porch, allowing him to come up off the street, off the curb, and sit down. Sit on the porch swing with you, just sit and enjoy a cup of lemonade in the hot sun, or maybe a cup of coffee in the evening. You know those movies we love to watch, and it's a time that is spent really getting to know someone. That time spent conversing on the front porch, just sitting and talking in the quietness. Nothing else going on, but just sitting and getting to know him. And I believe that's the first step of our level of faith, our level of spirituality, is that privilege of knowing God. In Philippians 3, Paul says, this is what I want to do. I want to know God, the power of his resurrection, the fellowship of his sufferings, and becoming like him even in death, really to know God. And I believe that God wants to know us. Jesus came to, as he said, to seek and to save the lost, to make the lost whole. But it also requires us having a willingness and a desire to say, God, I want to know you. God, come into my life. Step up on the porch. I don't want a distant relationship with you. I don't want to hold you away. I want you to come up into my life, onto the porch, and I want to get to know you. And in the relationships we have with others, there's people that you feel comfortable with just sitting and talking, sitting in that comfort zone and saying, let's come onto the front porch. But then if we want to go a little bit deeper, we can open the door of our homes, open the door of our hearts and our lives, and invite God into our house, into that front room relationship, that next level of spirituality, that next level of faith that we call love. And so let's go there now. In Revelation 3:20, Jesus said, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone opens the door, I will come in and be with them and they with me." And there's people in our lives where you don't mind sitting on the front porch with them, sitting and talking, but you might not necessarily invite them into your home. But yet there's people that say, you know what, come on in. Don't sit out there in the hot sun. Don't stand out there in the rain or in the snow or in the wind. Come on inside my home. And that next level is that relationship, that front room relationship. I remember there was that reality TV show with the Duggars, 19 Kids and Counting. And I didn't watch it much, but I do remember one time they were building a house, and in their design they created this large, what they called a front room. They called it the goodbye room. You know, when you have friends over and you're really having a good time and you say, oh, well, we got to get going. But you spend an extra 45 minutes standing by the door just talking, saying your goodbyes, and the conversations seem to keep going. That's the kind of room that we have where you're actually in the home. And Jesus wants to come into the home of our lives, to really, enter into our lives. And so in that front room, in that goodbye room, in that hello room, when you invite someone in, inviting Jesus into your life in such a way that say, you know what? I'm not just going to keep you at arm's length, not just going to keep you outside of my life. We know you, but I don't really invite you in, but I want to take it to the next level of inviting you into my house. Come in through the door. I'm opening up my door to you. And that's the level of faith, the level of spirituality we'll call love. You can know someone, but to love someone is to bring them into your life, into your home, to invite them in, to get to know who you are really, what you're like behind the closed doors. And so that's that level we're talking about in that front room level of faith, that front room relationship. In Deuteronomy 6:5, God says, love the Lord with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and all your strength. And so we're talking about loving God, not just knowing Him, but loving Him, taking things to that next level. So where are you at? Are you at that place where you know God, but you don't really say, God, come into my life? You're not really asking God to say, I want to have a love relationship with you. And so that love relationship is that front door that's really taking things one step closer, getting a little bit more intimate, getting a little more familiar with God, and we'll let Jesus coming into your life to see what your inner life is like, even just a little bit, opening yourself up to Him. Are you there yet? Well, I hope so. But let's take it a little bit deeper, because after you get to know God and know Jesus or know someone in your life and you start to love them, we want to take it to the next level. That level where don't just stand in the doorway, don't just stand in that front room. Why don't you come and be comfortable? Come into the living room of my life. Come into the living room and sit down and be comfortable. And that's that next level of faith we're going to talk about, the living room level, that level of worship. So let's go there now. Welcome to my living room. And this is the living room level of faith, that level that I like to call the level of worship. You know, when you have a relationship with someone and they come inside and you're like, don't just stand there in the doorway. Come on in, sit down, and make yourself comfortable. Now, we may get different ideas of what worship is, but worship really, in some spiritual sense, is creating an environment where God feels welcome in your life. When you worship something, you want them to feel welcome, to feel comfortable. When we go to church, we sing songs and praises. We're inviting God to come and visit with us in a special way. We're saying, God, we welcome you to this place, and we want you to know that you're valued, that you're loved, and that you're comfortable. I love what it says in Psalm 102. It says, He inhabits the praises of His people. Like God inhabits our praises. And so this living room level is about a level of inhabiting, a level of sitting and being comfortable. It's not that awkwardness, but really just enjoying time together in a little bit more intimacy, in a little bit more openness, in a little bit more comfort. You know, and we can get really an idea of this, that the level of worship in our spirituality is all about singing songs to God. But I believe it's deeper than that. In fact, in Romans 12:1, it says, offer your lives, offer your bodies, offer yourselves as a living sacrifice. This is your spiritual or your reasonable or your good act of worship. To create a life, to create an environment, a space where God feels welcome. Think about it. If you were inviting some kids into your home, you'd probably make sure you kept the decorum at an appropriate level. You wouldn't have a lot of swearing or inappropriate things on the TV. In the same way, to create a level of worship in our lives is saying, God, I want you to feel welcome in all areas of my life. I want you to know that my life, the way I live is honoring to you. It is making you feel comfortable, creating a place that you would want to be with me in relationship. We bring God into the living room of our lives and saying, as I live, that's how I want you to feel comfortable in every area of my life. And if you really love someone to that level, you want them to feel comfortable, you're going to do things to create in your home, in your heart, and in your life a level of comfort. You're going to have that level of worship and intimacy in your life. And it's the same way. In John 4:25, Jesus was talking to a Samaritan woman, and He says, God is spirit, and He longs to be worshiped by people who will worship Him in spirit and in truth. And again, you know those people that you kind of have that relationship. Yeah, they may come in and sit at your couch, but it's still awkward. But this level of relationship in the spiritual life, this level of faith about having a level of worship is saying, you know what, let's get past that awkwardness. God, I want you to feel welcome. I want you to feel comfortable. I want this to be natural and an open relationship. Let's sit and be comfortable with one another, being comfortable with God, being comfortable to the place where you're comfortable with Him sitting right in your living room, with Him being right in your life. No shame, no condemnation, no guilt, because God has forgiven you, and you started to realize by this level of relationship that He loves you so much. He loves you unconditionally. He accepts you as you are, and that gives you a freedom to open up to Him, to worship Him, to love Him back in a more powerful way, and to experience His love and goodness. But this level of comfort really only should make us desire to know God even more, to go to a deeper level. And so even in our relationships, you go from that level of a living room relationship to a higher level, to the dining room, to enjoying a meal. And that's the next level of faith, the next level of intimacy and spirituality we're going to talk about. And it's called the level of fear, or that dining room level of relationship. And let's go there now. And there's something about sitting and having a meal with a person that you really get to know them a little bit better. And so this next level of faith is that dining room level of faith, the level of fear. Now, Proverbs 9:10 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." Now, that idea of fear and that word of fear can get us a little scared at times, pun intended, but the understanding of it is a respectfulness. I think about it this way. If you're driving down the highway in a 55-mile-an-hour zone and you see a police officer, you're going to have a reaction. Maybe you're going to tap the brake before even knowing how fast you're going. You're going to look down at the speedometer. You're going to go from doing 56 in a 55 to doing 54. It's a level of respect. It's not a terror that you're sitting at home and the police are going to knock down your front door and come with a SWAT team and raid you. It's in the same way in which we have a fear and a healthy fear of God, a respect for His authority. And again, you learn a lot about a person when you sit and have a meal with them. If you're in a dating relationship and you're taking it to the next level of intimacy, you go from just sitting and hanging out maybe in a living room to enjoying and sharing a meal, maybe going out to a restaurant. That's when you really get to know the person's likes and dislikes and their proclivities, what they're really about. How do they treat their waiter or their wait staff? How do they order? What are their expectations? What do they like to eat? I've heard of people who have large businesses and who are hiring someone. Part of the hiring process will be to take them out to a restaurant and see how they treat the people around them, those who serve them. And that's that level of fear. When we get to learn and know what God is like, He says, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One gives us understanding. And so when you're sitting down with a meal, you get to learn, what is this person like? And when we do that with God, we get to say, you know what, God, I want to enjoy a meal with you. What do you like to eat? How do you like to have your food prepared? How do you like to be served and waited on? And so it's that learning and that understanding of getting to know God in His own personality. I think this is really where we start to get a little stuck in understanding of how we are to relate to God. What does God want from us? What does God want for us? What does God want to do in our lives? And when we get to that level of fear, that level of respect, that dining room level is saying, wait a minute, it's not just about me. It's not just about my loving God and how I feel affection towards Him and I'm glad that He's in my life and everything is good and comfortable, but saying, let's go deeper. I want to know God on a deeper level. What is He really like? There's a lot of people who claim to love God and know God and maybe even worship God, but don't take the time to say, God, what do you like? There are actually people who will say, God has to like me the way I am. God has to love everything that I love and everything that I do. Rather than saying, you know what, God? Maybe when you define sin, maybe when you define the things that you dislike and like, that those are worth considering. It's really having that respect for God in that level. And I think a lot of people miss out on this and never take it to this level of their spirituality. Never say, God, you're allowed to have your own personality. You're allowed to have your own likes and dislikes. And I want to know what those are. I want to live in line with your word, with your commands, with your desires for my life. I want you to be able to sit, and I want to learn how to serve you in the right way. And so that's that dining room level where we learn to fear God. We learn to love what He loves and maybe hate what He hates. And we begin to get an understanding of who He is. Again, that verse, the knowledge of the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding how God created things, and maybe asking to understand, why does He call things sin? Why does He dislike certain behaviors and actions? And why does He call them harmful and ask us to let go of certain things, or maybe to pursue certain things in certain ways? What kind of diet in the spiritual life, in our life with God, does He want us to have? The kind of activities and actions He desires. That's that level of sitting down for a meal with God, that dining room level of spirituality. I think some people want to skip over that. And there's even people who say, yeah, I love God and I worship God and I want to go right into serving God, that next level we're going to talk about. But I don't think that you can truly serve God with the right heart until you have learned to accept God the way He is and to learn how to fear Him in the proper way. But as we think about that and about sharing a meal with God, let's look to the next level of faith, that next room that we're going to go into, that kitchen level of faith, that level of service. So let's go there now. And now we're in the kitchen, that kitchen level of faith, of spirituality, that level of service. Now that we've gotten to know God as He is and what He likes, we are prepared and able and hopefully desiring to serve Him. Now there's a verse in Christianity a lot of people love to say. In Joshua 24:15, Joshua says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And I found that interesting. That kind of led me into this whole message of, because Joshua doesn't say, "As for me and my house, we will believe in God." No, he doesn't say that. He doesn't say, "As for me and my household, me and my family, we will love the Lord." He doesn't say that. He doesn't say, "As for me and my household, we will worship the Lord or fear the Lord." No, he takes it to the next level. And he makes this commitment that many of us say, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And serving the Lord is like having that level of relationship where you're going to do for Him. You're going to start to use your skills. This is when you take the giftings that God has given you and say, "God, how can I use the resources, the talents, the gifts, even the financial resources in order to serve you?" And so we learn how to serve God in this kitchen relationship, in this kitchen level of spirituality. I remember I was real good friends with someone, and they were having a Christmas Eve party, and inviting a lot of friends over, and we all sat down to a wonderful home-cooked Italian meal. But as the night wore on, it became apparent that the host family, was not really feeling that good. And as the night progressed, they got really ill. A stomach bug hit the whole family at once. My wife and my sons and I were blessed to be able to say, "Listen, you guys are sick. The night's over. Everybody else is going home. You go upstairs. You just rest." And we were able to serve them and help clean up everything. We had that level of relationship with them where we were able to just say, "We're going to wash all the dishes, put everything away. We know where everything goes. We've been here enough." And so we had that service level of relationship. It's the same way when we get that way with God. We're comfortable enough in our relationship with Him. We know what He likes and what He doesn't like. We know what the expectations are, and we feel blessed and privileged to be able to serve Him. Now, some people might say, "Well, how do you serve God?" Of course, you can serve by serving in the church, or serving or giving of your talents, your tithes, your treasures to the work of God's kingdom. Or maybe you can listen to what Jesus said in Matthew 25:40. And He said, "Whatever you've done for the least of these, brothers and sisters of mine, it's as if you did it for me." We serve God by serving others, by helping others, by reaching out to the poor and to the needy, by visiting those in prison, by caring for the orphan and the widow as God calls us to in His Word. These are all ways in which we serve God. But I also love what Colossians 3:20 says. says. It says, whatever you do in word or deed, do it as unto God. Work as unto the Lord. And when you start to live your life in this level of intimacy with God, in this level of spirituality, and this level of faith, you view all of your life as an opportunity to serve God. Whether you say, I'm going to be the best husband and father I can be. I'm going to care for my wife and my children as I'm doing for God. Or maybe even just making a cup of coffee for a stranger. I'm going to do it as if I'm doing it for Jesus himself. I may not like my job very much, but I'm going to go to work with that attitude that whatever it is I'm doing at work, I'm not working for humans. I'm not working for people or men. I am working for Jesus. And that's that level of service, of learning to serve God in that way. And so we get that level of intimacy with God where we know what he wants, we know what he expects, and we believe it's a privilege. And I believe when you start living at this level of life, people will start taking notice of your faith. Yeah, anyone could say, yes, I know God. Anyone could say, I love God. Or maybe even sing songs on a Sunday morning. But when you start to get to this level, when you really consider it a pleasure and a privilege and a blessing to serve God, that's a different level of spirituality that people are going to start noticing in your life. When you start serving others as if you're serving God. And that really takes your whole life and elevates it to a higher level, a more complete level of experiencing God in amazing and wonderful ways, because you've invited him into the kitchen of your life, into the service, into the actions and the doing of your life, where Christianity and your faith is no longer just about what you think or what you believe, but it starts to really be an engagement of who you are and what you do and how you live. And this is that fifth level of faith. But that next level we're going to go into is that level of deep intimacy in the secret place. Inviting God into that place where nobody else goes. Into that place, that bedroom level of faith. We call that the level of sacrifice. So let's go there now. And here we are in that bedroom, that intimate secret place with God. Now, in your relationships with others, usually that bedroom is that place that you only take that one special person. You don't just invite everyone into your bedroom. Everyone that you know doesn't get access to you in that secret place. And it's that same way in the levels of intimacy, the levels of faith, the levels of our relationship with God. Psalm 91:1 says, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Almighty shall rest in the shadow of his wings, shall enjoy his protection." And it's that level of sacrifice. Again, when you get married to a person, you're willing to give up certain things in your life. You're willing to give up certain freedoms and give up certain things. You're willing to make some sacrifices because you want to enjoy a personal, intimate connection with a person. And this is the highest level of faith, this sixth level. Jesus said, "Greater love has no one than this, than he laid down his life for his friends." And to get to that level of intimacy with God, to be alone and say, you know what, I'm willing to give it all up to be one with you, Jesus. I'm willing to let go of everything else, all of my hopes, my dreams, my desires. I give it all to you. And this is that level of faith that's in response to what Jesus already did. You see, for God so loved the world, for God so loved you, that he gave, he sacrificed his one and only Son, that if you would believe in him, put your hope, your faith, your trust in him, you would not die but have eternal life. Jesus was willing to lay down his life for you, to be his friend. And so Jesus says this is the highest level of love, the highest level of worship, the highest level of spirituality. And what he's really asking for us as we grow in our relationship with him, to reciprocate in the same way. But we do so as we lay our lives down. We lay everything down at the feet and we're willing to give it all. He says, what you give to me, I will give back to you. In my own life, I've started to realize God has given so much. Somebody once said to me, you know what? You can never outgive God. And so you learn to live life and just with an open hand saying, God, everything I have comes from you. And everything I have is really yours. Job, when he faced difficulties, when he started to lose and he started to experience suffering and loss, he said these words, "The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed is the name of the Lord." He says everything belongs to God anyway. He said again, Naked I came into this world, and naked I will leave. I'm not holding on to anything. And that's that level of faith that we see people who become missionaries, who are willing to become martyrs, have that level of they're willing to sacrifice it all because that relationship with Jesus, that relationship with God has become so important. And it's in this intimate relationship with God that we receive so much. When we invite Him into our bedrooms, into the place in our life that nobody else sees. You see, a lot of times, even when we invite people into our home, what do? We clean everything up and make it look nice. Maybe we shove everything into the bedroom and shut the door. But when we invite Jesus into our bedroom, we say, you know what? I'm laying bare everything. I'm opening everything up for you. Nothing is withheld from you. You can see everything, all the mess of my inner life in the secret place. What I hide from the rest of the world, God, I am showing and revealing to you. I'm inviting you into that secret place. I'm willing to give it all up, give up my own pride, my own arrogance, my own reputation, because Jesus, I want you to know me just as I am. It's an understanding that Jesus already knows everything about us anyway. He's already looking into the windows of our heart and into our bedrooms. He sees it all. But it's our willingness to open up and say, God, I'm not just going to let you see it. I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to show you who I really am and invite you into that intimate relationship. It's then when we get to that level, we get to experience what I like to call pillow talk with God. You know, that time when you just spend time alone in intimacy with Him. You know that pillow talk. And Jesus said about this, He said, what I speak to you in the dark place, what I speak to you in the secret place, go ahead and shout from the rooftops. You ever wonder why some people seem to have so much to say about God, and it seems like God is speaking to them all the time, and they always have some deep, fresh revelation of who He is, or some understanding of the Bible that God has showed and revealed Himself to them in so many wonderful and powerful ways? It's because of this level of intimacy. They've learned how to spend time in the secret place, to be willing to give up. Say, you know what? I may lose out and not be able to do all the things that I want to do in this life, but spending time with God is more important. And I'll sacrifice those other things, those other opportunities, to take that opportunity to be with God in that secret place, in that intimate place. And that's where God wants to be with you. And God is asking you to bring Him into deeper levels, closer and closer, and into your life, into your home, room by room. It starts on the porch, getting to know God, then inviting Him in as He knocks on the door of your heart, opening your door up and your life up to Him, sitting with Him in the living room of worship, dining with Him in the level of fear and respect, and learning to serve Him in the kitchen, and finally bringing Him into that bedroom relationship in your life of sacrifice. And so I want to ask you, as we're thinking about this, where are you at in your relationship with Jesus? What room do you find yourself in? But beyond that, I promised at the beginning of our message that not only would I explain to you what these different levels and these different rooms symbolized, but how you can learn to grow from place to place, from level to level, from room to room. And I think this is always an opportunity. God is asking us to be faithful. And as Jesus said, he that endures, that perseveres to the end, will be saved, will be made whole. It's about being faithful and sticking with it, being intentional and asking God to come into deeper levels. Paul wrote in his letter to the Philippians, he said, not that I've already attained all this. I haven't achieved it all. I haven't gotten there yet, but this I do, forgetting what is behind, pressing on to the goal of which God is calling me in Christ heavenward, upward, and onward. I want to have a deeper and even greater level of intimacy and a greater level of spirituality and level of faith with God, being more and closer to Him. And so how do we do that? Well, I believe that in our lives, we get opportunities each and every day in season to go through again and again these tests. And I believe the tests in our life come in three different ways. It's the test of mediocrity, the test of prosperity, and the test of adversity. And of course, I think everyone recognizes that test of adversity when things go wrong. But I believe we all find ourselves in different seasons. Sometimes it's that test of mediocrity. It's that when nothing seems to be going particularly great or particularly bad, it's just steady. And you start to wonder in your faith, does my relationship with God even make a difference? It's not seeming to be great. I mean, it's not miserable, it's not horrible, but does what I'm feeling with God and trying to be faithful and making sure I'm engaging with Him, praying and worshiping and reading and studying the Bible and getting to know Him and trying to enjoy fellowship in a church environment, does that really matter in my life? Does it really make a difference? And sometimes we can, in that test of mediocrity, when things are just kind of coasting and it seems dry, we can start to make excuses and say, you know what? It doesn't matter. It's not really going anywhere. It's not growing. It's not exciting anymore. It's just mediocre. And maybe I can let it slide. Maybe I'll sleep in one day and not spend that morning time with God, getting myself in that right mindset, that right place where I can be remembered and remind myself of all I have to be thankful for and praise and worship Him and ask Him to show me and give me opportunities to serve Him. And say, oh, it's just one day. But one day turns into two, turns into a week, and next thing you know, it's been weeks or months since you really spent time with God. That's that test of mediocrity. Or maybe I can skip church this one day. And again, I'm not all about a religion where you have to be there every Sunday, but we have to be wary of that test of mediocrity where skipping once church and attending worship once becomes twice, becomes months since we've been in fellowship and in contact with other believers, gathering as God calls us to. That's that test of mediocrity. Every time we start to experience that mediocrity, we have to ask ourselves, am I going to be faithful? Am I going to endure and persevere in order to make it to that next level of intimacy with God, that next level of faith? But then there's the level of prosperity. In Deuteronomy 8, God says, as He was preparing the Jewish people, the Israelites, whom He brought out of slavery in Egypt, who had wandered in that mediocrity in the desert for 40 years, being tested by God. Now we're getting ready to go into the promised land. And God said, be careful. When you have been eaten your fill and been satisfied and experienced all the blessings and the promises that I want to give you, don't forget the God who brought you here. You see, because there's that temptation when everything is going amazing, when our career is awesome and our relationships and our family seem to be doing so great and everything is going awesome, all our dreams are coming true, we can start to forget the God who has given us those blessings. And we can start to say, hey, I don't really need God. I've got it all figured out. Everything I could have asked for, I've already achieved. And we have that test of prosperity, that test of success. And God warns the people in Deuteronomy 8. He says, don't forget God when you experience those blessings. Don't forget God when everything is going great. And then, of course, there's that third test, that test of adversity, when our lives seem to fall apart. And I think sometimes God allows those things to happen, those things that are uncomfortable, in order to drive us to our knees, to bring us back to Him. And yet, in each and every calamity, in each and every tragedy, in each and every adversity, we have the choice before us. In this hardship, in this dark night of the soul, as the fathers of the faith used to call it, those difficulties that we all experience, am I going to press into God, or am I going to drift away from Him? Am I going to allow God to help me to see Him in a new way that I couldn't see Him and couldn't know Him had I not gone through difficulty? Remember what I said in Job. Job went through so much. He'd lost his family, he lost his wealth, he lost his health. And in the end, what did he say? He said, before all this happened, I knew of God. But because of these difficulties, now I have seen Him. I have seen Him face to face. I've gotten to know God better. And so that test of adversity is sometimes we don't want it. We wish we could avoid it. And yet God, who works all things together, as it says in Romans, can work even the difficulties and the hardships and the heartaches and the brokenness in our life to draw us into a deeper relationship with Him, to a higher level of faith, a level of spirituality, if we will let God use it, if we will even cling to Him through the test of adversity. So as we close our time together, I want to ask you, where are you at? What room do you find yourself in? But also, what test may you be going through? And so think about those things and how you can learn to grow. And I pray that even as I have today invited you and shown you my house, invited you into my life to get to know you a little bit better, I hope that you invite Jesus into your home, into your heart, into your life, that you would get to know Him better. And He asks us to invite Him into His life. And He says, I want to come and be with you and you with me so that we can know one another. This only happens through confessing and saying, Jesus, I believe in you. and believing in your heart that God sent him to this world to rescue you and that God raised him from the dead after he died for you. I hope that you have made that commitment. If you hadn't, please reach out to us. We would love to pray with you, to give you some information, and to teach you and show you how you can engage in a deeper level in your relationship with God to get to know him as part of your life. Well, I want to thank you for joining me. As always, I hope that this message has inspired, encouraged, and equipped you to live your life to the fullest. And until next time, we're going to talk about the power of forgiveness. But as always, remember, Jesus loves you, and so do I.